All right, we are back, and as advertised, we are thrilled to be welcoming Field Yates, the fantasy-focused football podcast from ESPN, to the show. Field, thanks a lot for coming on.
No problem, guys. Happy August to you. And at the time of this recording, we're just a couple hours away from kickoff of the NFL preseason. This is a good day.
Oh, man.
Fantastic day. The glorious day, absolutely.
Sounds like you're going to fit in pretty well here. All right, first question, and we're just going to get right into it. I mean, let's just assume, for argument's sake, there's one or two listeners out there who's familiar with us, but not you. And Wolf, I don't know what that demographic would be exactly.
Probably my mom, my nephew. Maybe that's about it.
All right. Well, so for this first question, we're talking to them directly. Quick synopsis: who are you in the fantasy world? Why should our listeners trust you?
Well, they can decide if they want to trust me or not. Up to them. But, yeah, my name's Field Yates. As you mentioned, I work at ESPN. Amongst my duties, I host or co-host the Fantasy Focused Football podcast along with Matthew Berry and Stefania Bell, our producer Daniel Dopp. We have a lot of fun. I take care of rankings at ESPN. I write our waiver wire column at ESPN. I'm part of Fantasy Football Now, which is our Sunday morning show. From 8, I'm sorry, what time are we on? 10 to 1. I was thinking 8 to 11.
I didn't want to correct you on your own resume.
I'm out of season. Yeah, Mountain Time, we started at 8. So 10 to 1 each Sunday, and we have a blast. It's always a good time, but, I really find the fantasy audience to be the most compelling because people are so into it, right? I mean, every single year it grows, and every single day there seems to be a new appetite and desire. But it's definitely a job that has no limits on the gratification it brings. We're totally lucky to have it every single day.
So that is a good segue into this next question. Is a buddy of mine. I said, hey, we're going to have Field Yates on the podcast. He said, all right, I'm going to ask this generic question, but I really want to know the answer. He said, how long has he been playing fantasy, and what about fantasy was it that just hooked you completely? What was it that made you be like, wow, this is what I want to do for a living?
So I'm 31. I was born in 1987, and at some points, probably around the age of 10 or 11, Sporting News had a very popular $50,000 per week fantasy football lineup. Nice. Kind of like daily fantasy, but a little bit different. Mm-hmm. I would say that it was my initial introduction into fantasy football. Each week you go and you set your lineup based on salary and all that. So maybe, 20 years or so of fantasy football. The longest league that I'm actively in is probably 12 or so years old, maybe 10 years old. Mm-hmm. Somewhere in that range as well. It's college buddies from Wesleyan University.
Nice.
And what hooked me is, honestly, guys, it is like it's I would say labor of love, but yeah. It's a labor of enjoy. It's not even a labor. It's just enjoyment, right? I mean, It gives me something that we can look forward to every single week. And during the off season, in the same way that teams get hyped about their own season ahead, we do the same thing in fantasy.
No, that's true. You made me feel a little bit old with that. I was actually in my first fantasy league in 1991. We were still writing, actually going to the newspaper and writing stuff down by pen. That's a great story. That's way better than my story.
Hey, listen, we all have people might find that varying degrees of interesting.
Well, I found it pretty interesting, so thanks for sharing. All right, we're going to get into actual football here. We usually talk when we have guests on. We'd say, kind of what makes you a fantasy wolf as opposed to a fantasy sheep. But with you, we think it's pretty clear. I mean, you have good access. You get news fast. You analyze it super well. So on that note, we're going to dive right into some of the players, some of the news surrounding them that's going on right now. So just yesterday, you actually broke news about Doug Baldwin and that he's likely to miss the entire preseason. What's going on? Who do you expect to emerge, if anybody, in his absence?
Yeah, it's a difficult situation for him to have to deal with right now, just given the timing of it. And guys, I'll just be honest. I mean, you look around and who on that roster strikes fear into you at wide receiver if Doug Baldwin is not healthy and on the field, right? I mean, to a degree, Tyler Lockett. I think they call him, what do they call it? They have I think it's like Turbo or some sort of special nickname for Tyler Lockett out there amongst his teammates. But, Brandon Marshall was ineffective before he got hurt last year, so I don't know that it's Brandon Marshall. I don't know that there's anybody that you say to yourself, okay, I need to make sure that I account for that player. It's a knee injury for Doug Baldwin. Whether or not we see him the rest of this preseason, I don't know. He is certainly a player that kind of defines toughness at that position. But given the timing of it and given the need that they have at wide receiver, we're hopeful that he is back by Labor Day weekend or the days after that when teams are preparing for week 1 of the regular season.
Yeah, I ended up dropping him from, I was very high, about 22 or so overall to about not wide receiver, 22 overall to about 40 overall or so. Is that an overreaction or is it not enough? What about are you doing with him in your rankings now?
Yeah, I haven't made a massive adjustment on my rankings as of yet. And what I tend to do during the preseason is, as much as I can, let things marinate a little bit more. He's a player that I flagged as somebody that may have to move down. Conversely, Brandon Cooks, who I actually said on the podcast today, Thursday, that I don't plan on drafting, might be a player that I would eventually move up based off what you hear about how they feel about Brandon Cooks. My point is in the preseason, the first week includes so much hype and so much coverage because we've been waiting months for this. At the same time, we have to be the pads are just barely on. We don't have games until tonight, and go from we'll go from there.
Yeah, that's what I figured too. And the other big news, and you were breaking this earlier in the week, is now official. Eric Decker has signed with the Patriots, which brings some clarity to this unclear situation. What do you expect from Decker in New England, and as well just that pass catching core in general?
I'm not trying to be a fence sitter, but I would just say this, guys, is like with Decker, my first hope is that, or my first, I guess, the first part of the process here is let's see if he makes the team, right? Yeah. Let's see that he makes the team this season, and we'll go from there. He's obviously a guy that's had a Decker-rated career. He was not an effective player last season, though, in Tennessee. Much better quarterback situation in New England and a little bit different role for him. Let's see if he makes the team. If he does, the numbers bear it out that the Patriots are going to have massive production from the slot over the course of a season. So whether Decker assumes some of that role, whether it's Julian Edelman once he returns, whether it's Chris Hogan once it returns. There are so many good players in that offense. It's just a matter of who gets the most opportunities because whoever does is going to be fantasy relevant.
Any other random news or rumors that you've been hearing you feel like breaking right on the fullback dive today?
I'm trying to think of anything else that I've heard. No, I'm trying to think of some good fullback news. No.
That was pretty direct, Wolf. Yeah.
No, I'm just checking. Have you ever, and we're going to get into the heart of the interview in a second, but have you ever beat Schefter to a story? And if so, how does it feel?
There have been some. We're not, but I don't consider Adam competition. I consider him one of my dear friends. We went to dinner last night together, which is we hang out regularly. He's the best, not just in this business. He is the best reporter in the world. Period, and a great guy, an even better person.
That is high praise, and honestly, we agree with you. We think he's great too.
Yeah, he's the best.
All right, we're going to get into part 2 now. This is Into the Wolves' Den, and this is where the Wolf has hand-selected 3 of your bolder rankings or claims that he agrees with 100%, and you're going to chat about it. This is going to be a nice kind of bonding experience where you guys are going to kind of slap each other on the back and say, yeah, I think that too. And then part 3 is going to be where you guys differ on a few things, and possibly that will be more contentious, but still friendly. All right, part 2. Wolf, why don't you go ahead? Why don't you talk about where you and Field are on the same page?
Yeah, we'll start at running back. There's 2 guys I really like you're higher on than your colleagues and in general the ECR. And one's Derrius Guice and the other's McKinnon. Guice hovers around RB17 in the general ESPN rankings, but you have him a few spots higher, RB15, above Mixon, which the ESPN consensus did not have. And I fully agree. He's my RB13. Actually, just kind of moved him above Devonta Freeman, which is a little bold, but I'm all in on Guice, especially as this news pours in. What are you so excited about with Derrius Guice?
Well, I just think that he's got the best shot other than Saquon Barkley to be a predominant back in his respective team's backfield as a rookie. And I should note this is on rankings, and I've said this to anybody who will listen. I've said it on the podcast. I've said it to people that are in an authority spot at ESPN. I'm really not a massive proponent of specifically ranking players one by one by one. If I had it my way, we would tier players.
I love that. Mm-hmm.
We would have at the top of the running backs, we would have 4 that would be in a tier unto themselves.
Yeah.
Right? It's Zeke, David Johnson, Le'Veon Bell, Todd Gurley. None of them would surprise me if they finished as a top one, as the best running back. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying that it will definitely be one of those 4, but if I had the chance to guess them or the field, I would take them. Next tier would be some sort of Alvin Kamara, Saquon Barkley, maybe 1 or 2 other player tier as well. Mm-hmm. So what I would say is on these rankings, I've got the Derrius Guice, Joe Mixon tier is sort of one and the same. I don't get too bogged down though, but I do like the opportunity that Guice has. Absolutely.
And what about McKinnon? You labeled him as your breakout candidate for the year. What has you so high on him this year?
I think, I always tell people follow the money, right? I mean, you've got someone who is making now $8 million per season. And last year, Carlos Hyde, in his single year playing for Kyle Shanahan, had more catches in 1 year, 59, than he had targets in any other year of his NFL career. Not catches over catches, catches over targets. So I just think that clearly they have an idea of what they want to do with Jerick McKinnon, which it would not surprise me or anybody if he has 80 catches. Now, the issue is whether or not he'll be able to score a lot of touchdowns. I play in a non-PPR league where I had the opportunity as a keeper to keep him at around $40 of a $200 salary cap, and I passed. The problem is, and the reason why is it's non-PPR, heavier emphasis on touchdowns in that regard. Just, those 80 catches for 500 yards counts for 50 points, not absolute stud.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the Shanahan factor, too. Obviously, he just has such a steady track record of producing RB1s. I believe there's a stat, like 5 of his last 6 running backs have finished in the top 15 at the position. And he said, just like you mentioned, cut up film of McKinnon of what they like to do with their running backs and that he excelled in everything he does, especially in the passing game. So I'm all in with you. I think he's going to explode this year, even if the touchdowns aren't there. The total yardage and receptions are going to be monstrous. Now we get down to another tier, and I know, again, you mentioned, I imagine this group of receivers are all in the same tier, and that's kind of Julio Jones alongside Mike Thomas and those guys. You have Julio at wide receiver 5 below Thomas, and I agree. I think that's spot on. I have Thomas higher personally, and while I'm with you that it's a group and they're all kind of, any one of them could outscore the other, eventually you got to make the decision, right, and choose a guy. So it sounds like you would pick Thomas over Julio if you're on the clock today. Is that correct, or what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I would. At the same time, like, you nailed it. They're in the same tier for me. How do you break a tie between 2 players like that? Oftentimes for me is I look at the couple of pertinent things, right? I mean, the yards are probably going to bounce in Julio's favor, but the touchdowns might bounce in Mike Thomas's favor. So it's about as simple as that, is what I would tell you, is, that's sort of where I end up. And I think that the best method when it comes to the draft, in a lot of times, is just trust your gut, trust your gut, or don't overthink it. So that's where I end up. That's where I end up there. With Julio and Mike Thomas, but you can't go wrong. I mean, there's literally no way to go wrong.
Yeah, very true. And then this one might be a little bit different because you have these guys a solid 10 or so spots higher than the rest of the consensus over at ESPN. So I wanted to get your takes quick on Marquise Goodwin and Edelman. You have Goodwin at wide receiver 29, Edelman at wide receiver 30. And likewise, I'm higher on both of those guys. I have Goodwin at 28, Edelman 29, a solid 10 or so spots higher than the ECR as well. So that seems like it might be a tier jump as compared to just like a 2 guys that are right neck and neck. What has you higher on those 2 guys?
Well, I think that with Goodwin, it's probably people catching up. It's, hey, Pierre Garçon is back from last year, and I'm a fan of Pierre Garçon, unquestionably, and he could be an absolute volume freak. But 5 games last year when Jimmy Garoppolo started, the San Francisco 49ers looked so different on offense. Mm-hmm. I think some people are worried about whether or not that can sustain, whether or not that can be close to what it was going into this season. My contention is that it will largely put it this way. It may not be that they go 5-0, obviously, to begin the season, but they have a very good shot of being a highly effective offense. And Marquise Goodwin is one of those players who perhaps his greatest strength in some ways serves as his greatest limitation. And what I mean by that is he is, without exaggerating, a world-class athlete as a sprinter. I mean, like Olympic level good. He has worn our country's colors to participate in Olympic trials, Olympics, etc.
Yeah.
So people just think, oh, he must be, one of those speed guys that just runs down the field straight and beats you in the same way that Deshaun Jackson does. Well, he can do that, but he can also do a lot more than that. And I think he showed some of that last year, and I think he's going to show more of that this year. And with Edelman, part of my theory is kind of what we did with Tom Brady a couple of years ago when he was suspended for the first 4 games of the year was, all right, it's not that you are getting Edelman for 12 games. It's you're getting Edelman and a player that you can replace him with in composite for 16 games. So maybe I think of it this way. I'm okay with drafting Edelman as my 3rd wide receiver, and instead of, and then whoever my 4th wide receiver, as in the first player off my bench would be in a normal draft, like that guy could be my starter. I'd rather live with him for 4 games than bypass Edelman and get inferior players in that round. I think that he's going to, when he returns, even in 12 games, like it wouldn't stun me if he picks up 75 or 80 catches.
Wow. No, absolutely. I'm fully with you. I think he's going to dominate upon his return. He hopefully will. Maybe that helps him be healthier for the stretch run when you need him the most there. He'll be motivated, obviously, fresher than everybody else on the field. I love that. And just to kind of go off of the whole Marquise Goodwin run, when Jimmy Garoppolo was the quarterback those 5 weeks, Goodwin was the wide receiver 12 in fantasy as well. So if that continues, and all the reports so far is that Goodwin remains the 49ers' top wide receiver, even with Pierre Garçon returning. So, I mean, I think it's just going to continue doing what he did, and going in round 8 or so right now is just a huge value. So I'm with you on both those guys for sure.
All right. Well, that's nice that you guys agree so much, but we got field for maybe another 10 minutes. And so I'd like to get into some of the disagreements. And this is where I'm just going to kind of stand off to the side and watch like they did in the 1800s, where the 2 gunfighters would come out and one guy would hide in a barrel and look through the little hole in it. That's me. Let's talk about disagreements, Wolf. Lead off with Corey Davis. How about?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Corey Davis, and it seems like you might not be. You have him at wide receiver 45, below some guys like Cooper Kupp, Kelvin Benjamin, Jordy, Marquise Lee, only a spot ahead of Sanu. He's my wide receiver 26 as comparison. So I'm just wondering, what has you down on Corey Davis this year?
Not sure. I'm not sure that I'm necessarily down on Corey Davis as much as the ranking might reflect. I had a piece that went on ESPN.com a couple of days ago about breakout candidates in their second year. And, well, he was the player that led the column. It was his photo that appeared at the top of that column. So I like Corey Davis as a player. My questions are probably more about whether the quarterback comes around a little bit this year. Marcus Mariota is a player with an abundance of talent and ability, but he struggled last year. He struggled as a thrower. Like, it wasn't like he struggled with something that is a little bit more correctable. Like, he struggled as a thrower. So the question is whether that can be overcome this year. I like Corey Davis as a late-round flyer. Again, I think if you pair him with other more certainties at wide receiver, I mean, he's got a massive, massive ceiling.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one thing that could improve for Mariota is the play calling. I know the exotic smash mouth is long gone now, and I'd like this guy they have coming in, LaFleur. He's obviously been groomed under Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay. And one thing in particular that could help him specifically as a passer is this guy LaFleur is very dependent on play action. And that's something that, as bad as Mariota was overall as a thrower last year, he thrived on play action. According to PFF, his 122.8 QB rating and 11.2 yards per attempt on play action was the first in the NFL last year. And he only had 13 touchdowns, which again was pathetic, but 9 of them were on the play action throws. So if this is something LaFleur truly loves, and those attacks with the Falcons were the highest in the league on play action with Shanahan, and then Sean McVay's attack was right around 30% play action, and the Titans were only about 20%. I think that specifically, just that one thing could really help the whole passing game. And of course, Davis then being the target hog might really benefit and jump up because of that. So I'm all in. I think it's going to be that Shanahan X, target hog guy. And with the improved Mariota, I think Davis rides alongside him. So I'm all in. I think he's going to blow up. Another running back, we'll move to that position now. A couple running backs are a little bit lower on than me. Would be Burkhead at 36 and Tarik Cohen at 39. And I have those guys about 10 spots higher each. Burkhead up in my RB27 and Cohen at RB28. So if you don't mind telling me, what are some of your things you're down on about those guys, or what has them lower in your rankings?
Yeah, I mean, I love your Burkhead call. I mean, he's actually a player that I've said since those rankings have gone up that, it's a player that could present the ultimate value based off where he's being drafted right now. It is clearly an offense that is built to put up massive points. For now, I'm just hedging on Sony Michel as the top Patriots running back. But no, it wouldn't surprise me at all if Rex Burkhead is the player that, we had a poll, the Fantasy Focus, I believe it was Wednesday, that we revealed on Thursday. And it was which Patriots running back will lead the team in touchdowns. And actually ended up being Burkhead in a very slight edge over Sony Michel. So I do like Burkhead. In terms of Tarik Cohen, it's volume. He also made that list that I was talking about with Corey Davis, but his volume. I mean, how many times can you reliably trust on him to have maybe more than 10 or 12 carries? 10 or 12, 15 touches? To me, it feels like it's not going to be that prevalent.
Yes, I agree with exactly the Burkhead, what could make him a huge value, touchdowns. That's where he kind of thrived after he came back from injury and stole that role from Gillislee. Was the RB, I believe, 12, I'm looking at my notes here, over that span, 14.1 points per game, really inherited that role, had 8 touchdowns in only 10 games. And your guy, Mike Rice, over there at ESPN, one of the best beat writers, I think, out there, has already come out and said, we think Burkhead's going to keep that role, very reliable, dependable there. So I think he maintains that. Obviously, I saw another stat that you guys had, which was fantastic. The Patriots are tied with the Saints with 75 goal line over the last 3 seasons. And, I mean, we saw what Blunt did with that 2 seasons ago, 18 touchdowns. And if Burkhead really does maintain that stranglehold, I love his scoring upside there. The one thing with Cohen that I think could increase his usage is that play calling switch from Nagy to after John Fox going to Matt Nagy. I really like this Matt Nagy coach, a guy that really loves to move people around and use them to their fullest upside. He said he's giddy about how he's going to use Cohen and maximize this versatile skill set. And so far in camp, he's been lining up, according to the reports, out wide and in the slot and moving all over the place. You're seeing him streak down the field on vertical routes and all this great stuff. I really think that Nagy could, even if Howard is a beast, and I love Howard, and I think he's going to be that horse, I think the catches will go up, and maybe it's a situation almost like Ingram and Kamara light, where it's this pass-catching explosive dynamo. I mean, he led the league, according to PFF, in their breakout percentage with over 50% of his runs going for 15-plus yards last year. It's a crazy stat, and if he gets those touches that I think he is, I think he could really blow up. And the last question I did have, though, was Dak at QB10. I think it's pretty easy to be low on Dak because of the weapons downgrades there. I mean, Dez is gone, Witten's gone. Who's he throwing to? But clearly you're still in on him. And I like him as a player, so I'd love to get higher on him. What do you like so much about Dak this year?
I just think we talk about avenues to fantasy relevance. I think he just has enough avenues to fantasy relevance, and I think as a runner, obviously as a thrower, I get it, the weapons stink, but it's not like they've ever been great, and he's always made very, very good on his opportunities. And I'll just say this, in fantasy, we tend to stick to evaluating things that we can see or numbers that we have, and I'm not sure you can necessarily evaluate a player's ability to meet challenges, but Dak Prescott seems like the guy that tends to rise to the occasion. I think he'll do that again this year.
Yeah. Who do you think is going to emerge as like the top target hog? There's rumors it's Allen Hurns, but I don't know. Do you have any predictions as who might be that top guy?
I don't know that I have a full – no, I don't have a feel for it. I mean, I would just be guessing, just like anybody else does. It's Thursday, August 2nd. I don't want to tell people that I have a good feel for it when I don't.
I appreciate your candor on that because most people would have just guessed something. So thank you.
I know. I think Zeke could inherit a lot of it too. So I have Zeke at my 2 running back right now. I could see him taking a solid share. But I think you're ready to move.
Yeah, we're gonna finish up with a quick rapid fire no huddle offense. Wolf, we'll just alternate. I'll go first. All right, Wolf. I'm going to throw you an easy one first, Field. Who should go first overall in the fantasy draft?
Give me Todd Gurley.
Love it. Give me your most undervalued player at each position. So quarterback, wide receiver, running back, and tight end. Who's the most undervalued at each?
Quarterback, Matthew Stafford. Running back, Joe Mixon. Wide receiver, Adam Thielen. Tight ends, probably Delaney Walker. Feels like every year.
Yeah.
All right, solid. All right, let me ask you the exact same question, but tell me who's the most overvalued guy at each spot.
Maybe Kirk Cousins at quarterback.
Thank
running
you.
back, Devontae Freeman. Wide receiver, Jarvis Landry. And tight end, probably Jimmy Graham.
And what early round draft pick, so rounds 1 to 3, is going to ruin a fantasy season this year?
None.
Wow. All right. How about what mid-round guy, you're talking like 4 to 6, 4 to 7, is going to win some people some titles that people don't see coming?
If I knew, he wouldn't be going in the 4th to 6th round for me. I mean, I think you're asking what are some players that I think have some upside. I think that
Sure.
players that have some upside include, we talked about Corey Davis already on this podcast. I think Andrew Luck won't be in rounds 4 to 6, but he could be he could be a star, and he could be back on track, and that would change a lot of things. I think if you guess right on one of the Titans running backs, that could be a player that really emerges. I think Will Fuller's got a high ceiling.
Absolutely. I love all those picks. We call them penny stocks, and most call them the late round lottery tickets. Give us one or two that you could see absolutely exploding this year.
I don't know, but absolutely exploding is not the right word, because I wouldn't, they wouldn't be going in the late rounds for me if I thought they were going to absolutely explode. But some players that I like, I still believe that there's a spot for Trey Burton in your lineup. I still believe there's a spot for Cam Meredith in your lineup. I still believe there's a spot for John Ross, somewhere in a 12-team league. That's what I would say.
Absolutely.
All right, Let's wrap things up. Our last question. Let's wrap it up with your boldest prediction of the year that you're willing to share with us, and a reminder of where people can find you on social media to interact.
Yeah, Field Yates is the easy part. Social media everywhere at Field Yates. Boldest prediction of the year.
At least as of August 2nd.
I'm not. I'm sort of like. I'm sure you guys know Brian Windhorst, who does a tremendous job in the NBA coverage, and not really much in the bold prediction business. Because they're sort of you're set up for failure.
Sure.
Boldest prediction would be. I know, guys. I don't have the boldest prediction. I don't have one.
That's fair.
I don't have one right now. Because if it was a bold prediction, then I would have to change. If I said, hey, something like whatever, like I think Chris Carson will be more effective than Rashad Penny. Well, then I would have him ranked different. But no.
All right. Well, if you come up with something super bold in the next month, just shoot it out on Twitter, and we'll count that for your question 7 on the rapid fire. We really, really appreciate you taking the time, Field. It was thanks for stopping by.
No problem, guys. Have a great rest of the